You do not have to agree on everything to have a great relationship. Hell, I'll help you out. You never will agree on everything. As part of two individual human beings with different minds and different ways of thinking coming together means, right? You're going to have things where they're not going to mesh so perfectly. But what you do need to stop doing is letting disagreements turn into emotional wars. See, a lot of you think you're not compatible with your partner for different reasons because you bump heads. But in reality, you just never learn how to disagree without shutting down, lashing out, or walking away. Disagreement isn't the problem. How you handle it is. See, most people confuse conflict with crisis. Just because your partner sees something differently than you do does not mean they're against you. Disagreement does not equal disrespect, right? Or opponent, the ops. So you have to learn to pause, breathe, and check your reaction. You never need to win the argument. You need to protect the connection you and your partner have. And a lot of times we get into these debative situations that turn into arguments because you get more focused on winning. Why? Because usually the thing you're talking about is emotionally triggering enough to you to where the conversation is emotionally charged enough to where you start forgetting the main focal point, which is being on the same page in unity, and you get more consumed with your ego and being right. And that's exactly where communication breaks down. And even though the subject matter of the conversation or whatever the focal point most likely had less to do with you guys' connection and your ability to stay together, but subconsciously it turns into that for you because your subconscious mind starts reading into different cues and different information about the thing you're butting heads on, right? It starts reading it as, there's more to meets the eye to this, or this means something else, or it means all this other things based off of one thing. And you start coming to conclusions that energetically and physically and emotionally, you start to disconnect a little bit, little by little. It's little incisions over time, little tears and breaks that you don't realize until you are far enough apart and you feel really disconnected. You look up one day and feel like, why are we not locked in like we used to be? Unity does not just mean agreement. It more so means respect, right? Mature love knows we can disagree or believe differently and still move forward together in our own perspectives, but still be locked in arms side by side. You have to be able to respect your partner's perspective, even if you don't share it. You don't have to like their perspective to respect their perspective, right? And that's something we all have to learn to embrace more and be able to live with, especially in the most emotionally charged circumstances, as long as their delivery of their perspective is respectful. So you have to get used to things like saying statements to your partner like, I hear that, I disagree, but I understand, right? I don't agree with what you're saying, but I hear what you're saying. I understand it. I can respect that. And that's good enough. You don't have to walk away saying, okay, I hear you and all right, I agree. I got you now. I'm with you now, right? You can maybe be with understanding where they're coming from, but still choose to disagree to the conclusion they come to. And you both can respect that for each other. And see, that is the stuff that builds trust, not walls between the two of you. See, it's not about changing their mind or them changing yours. It's about you understanding their mind and them understanding you. That's the point. That breeds the unity. That breeds the, hey, even though I see it the way I see it and you don't agree, wow, you still embrace me. You still get me. I still feel seen and heard. That's the point. So you got to stop reading into every disagreement like it's a red flag, right? It's not the end of the world. Just because they don't see things the way you do doesn't mean your partner doesn't love you, right? You got to stop turning a disagreement into distance because that's what winds up happening. And look, I get it. We don't intentionally do this. Consciously, oftentimes, people aren't telling themselves, oh, my partner doesn't agree with me, so I'm going to become less and less close to them, right? I'm going to distance myself more. But that's what winds up happening subconsciously and emotionally until you look up and you realize that you are being kind of distanced or you are distanced from them, right? But when this happens in a subconscious way, then now you start to kind of justify it. You start giving yourself reasons. Well, it's because they did this or they believe that or whatever, whatever. And all it does is tear away at a relationship you want to preserve and protect. So don't let conflict become an emotional wedge between the two of you that you keep feeding for days. Listen, if it does not break the foundation, it's not a deal breaker. So don't treat it like it's one. So if the conversation is emotionally triggering enough, that's when you need to slow down. Because emotional conversations will push buttons because you're passionate about it. You care. But that's exactly why that's not the time to prove your point. That's the time to protect the emotional space. And that's when you got to take breaks. You revisit the convo when you're both regulated, when you're both back in a more productive state, if the conversation is important enough to continue, right? Because whenever emotions are high, wisdom typically is low. Whenever we're in our most triggered spaces, we tend to shut off our higher faculties and we start to default to our more animalistic brain in nature, right? Fight, flight, freeze, all those things. And that's one of the worst states you want to make decisions from in a place of, right? You don't want to make decisions from a place of being triggered, because now you're not, talking through things and working through things with your intellect and all of your skills and tools and abilities. You're working through it with your reflex and your impulse, which gets you disastrous results oftentimes. And this is what I stress to clients and people, period, when they swear they're great communicators. They talk so highly of, oh, no, I'm a really good communicator. People say I'm a good communicator all the time when I talk to people about things. Well, yeah, of course you are when you're talking to a friend about their situation with someone else, or a family member about another family member, or something like that, something to where you don't have as much emotional triggered investment into the equation. Of course, all those higher faculties you have, all your ability to be a great listener is all present. Your ability to, really validate their perspective is all there because it's not emotionally charging enough for you. But whenever you're in the center of it, whenever the person that you're talking to is talking to you about you in the way that they feel about something you did or said or whatever the case is, or a circumstance that they're directly related to that you're a part of, and you have a firm stance that they're saying something opposite of, that's when it starts really challenging those faculties. And that's when they go out the window. But when people think of themselves, we like to think positive and highly of ourselves, because who wants to think of themselves as being part of the problem? So when we think about how good I am with communicating, first thing people do is they go to the moments whenever they did an amazing job at executing effective communication. When talking to someone where it wasn't as emotionally charged, they look at all those bright moments because maybe the emotionally charged ones are not as common, or those are the ones that turn into a mess. And what you do is you lean on all the examples you had where you did it good, but the examples that you did it well in are usually not as applicable to the circumstances where it matters most, which is where you have the most emotional investment. Now, whenever a conversation does impact the bottom line for you, if a difference of perspectives or opinions between you and your partner does impact the bottom line, that's different, right? If this conversation reveals incompatibilities to your values, your goals, or your deal breakers, then now you need to look into this deeper. Now, some of those conclusions you may come to in my partner's not right for me, or they're not really the best fit for me, or maybe even they don't love me the way I thought they do. Maybe those things are accurate now, if those core fundamental pieces are misaligned now through what you're hearing from them and what they're hearing from you. Now you may need to take a step or an action towards, all right, exploring this in a more concerning way and coming to a conclusion about what you need to do. Because the answer might be you need to walk away if it gets to be that, right? If it's a deal breaking type of stuff. But 80% of fights had nothing to do with those type of things. 80% of fights are more about tone, timing, pride, and ego, not actual life altering differences. Yet we wind up fighting to the point to where the relationship falls apart and becomes a life altering difference at that point now, right? And that's all because we have to practice, and a lot of us are lacking a certain level of emotional intelligence and the emotional maturity to follow, meaning your ability to understand and process your own emotions and regulate them effectively within yourself first with the intelligence piece. And then what you output, what you do, the action you take as a result of regulating those emotions is the maturity, the way you go about it. But whenever you are really impulsive and you keep cutting the other person off, or you jump out, you speak and you say whatever, right? And, or whenever you, respond in a kind of an aggressive manner, it's kind of attacky. Your voice raises high all the time or whatever it is. And you're kind of like not in a more calm state. It's showing areas where your emotional intelligence and maturity needs work. Now, this is not something that you have to be perfect in. Heck, I'm not perfect in it, right? I'm pretty good. But the point is, you have to be aware of this and continue to work on it, because all of us are going to be human and have flaws and have moments where we are emotionally charged enough to where we do kind of get into our animalistic way, and we do kind of, snap out, or we do, get elevated, and it's hard for us to stay calm when we're talking through it because we're passionate enough and it matters enough to us. That's going to happen. But it has to be the lesser of the amount of times that happens versus more of the times where you are speaking more productively, where you are able to listen without having to jump on everything that triggers you, right? So you can actually be effective at producing the result you want versus the one that you don't want, that you're trying to avoid, that winds up being, a self-fulfilling prophecy because you are unable or incapable to execute your half of the equation to get there. So in closing, disagreeing is not what breaks relationships. It's the lack of skill around how to handle it when you do disagree. So it's something that I've been really good at, and I've been blessed to be able to help a ton of couples with. If you and your partner are struggling with learning how to disagree constructively, to make sure you keep that unity and respect so you can keep the love and keep growing together, and you want help with that, then email or DM me the word coaching and we will get to work, as long as you both are truly ready to put that work in. Let's get it.